to catch up here. Okay, and I think we're on. Welcome back, everyone. We're ready to start our second session of the day. I'm really excited for this session. We're going to have some great presentations from some of our Indigenous communities from Ontario, four of a few wonderful communities doing great invasive species work. And then we're going to have a roundtable discussion after the presentations. So we're hoping that you guys are paying good attention through the presentations, and we'll have lots of questions for the discussion. So to start us off, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Rhonda Gagnon. Rhonda is an Ojibwe from Doki's First Nation and is married with 3 children. She spends a lot of her time at camp in the Temagami region, where she's an avid hunter, fisher, and gatherer of medicines and berries. Rhonda is the manager of the Lands and Resources Department for Anishinaabe Nation and came on board back in February 2007. She's been passionate about our environment and how human activities are affecting Mother Earth within the Anishinaabe Nation. Rhonda has an extensive background in the environmental sector. Her educational background includes a college diploma in environmental protection and compliance and an honors Bachelor of Science degree in environmental science and physical geography. She obtained her master's in environmental science with a strong focus on the Anishinaabe Nation in the Great Lakes Basin and government perspectives on why consultation is important, along with a geomatics certificate and a watershed management certificate. During her university studies, she received 2 awards from the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council and the Presidential Gold Medal. So welcome, Rhonda. We're looking forward to your presentation on the importance of relationships.
Thank you, Mackenzie. And I'll just share my screen.
Sure.
And then just gotta let me know what you see, if it's notes or the full screen when I put it up.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I see your notes side right now. There we go.
Perfect. So as she said, my name's Rhonda Gagnon, and I'm the manager at the Lands and Resources Department of the Anishinaabe Nation, and I've been there for 15 years as of February 14th. I'm here to talk to you about the importance of relationship building and what we have been up to throughout our relationship with ISK and others. So just to start us off of who we are, for those ones that don't know who we are, the Anishinaabe Nation is a political territorial organized nation known as a PTO. We are the primary support for advocacy and secretariat services for 39 First Nations. The Union of Ontario Indians is our formal name, and it was established in 1949, but we go by the Anishinaabe Nation as a collective of 39 First Nations. Here we have various departments within the Anishinaabe Nation that supports 39 First Nations, and where we land is Lands and Resources Development, and we're the Fish Clan, and I don't see us in here. Oh, I guess we'll be probably the Turtle and Fish Clan, and we are in the Martin Clan. So we have actually various clans, but we are actually the Fish Clan. We have new leadership as of last year of 2020. We have our new Grand Chief, Reg Niganobi. We have new and former regional Grand Chiefs for our 4 regions. We have Regional Deputy Grand Council Chief Travis Boisneau for Lake Huron region. We have Deputy Grand Council Chief Melvin Hardy for the Northern Superior region. And we have Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden for the Southeast region, and Deputy Grand Council Chief Joe Muskokeman for the Southwest region. The Lands and Resources Department is here to foster a better quality of life by ensuring access to natural resources, by supporting the goals and values and aspirations of the Anishinaabe Nation and the 39 First Nations. Currently, there is 63 First Nations within the Great Lakes Basin, and the Anishinaabe Nation represents 39 of those First Nations within the Great Lakes Basin. And so why invasive species is important to the Anishinaabe Nation and the 39 communities is that we know that these invasive species are impacting our environment. They're impacting our territories, they're impacting the traditional territories as regional territories, and the Anishinaabe Nation as a collective, the Great Lakes Basin. Today, the ash borer is moving its way up north, making the black ash to be listed as an endangered species. And this is very important because this then impacts the ability for our communities to exercise their rights in harvesting medicines or products used to make goods such as baskets and stuff. The carp has also been found in the Great Lakes, and we have no idea how this is going to impact our fisheries that we rely on for a sustainable food supply. So it's causing a lot of disruption within our territory. Here is Kettle and Stony Point that have lost their natural shorelines to plants, such as the Phragmites. And what they've seen since the invasion of Phragmites is a decline in shoreline birds, mammals, and waterfowl. However, this community undertook a project back in 2010 to control this invasive species plant. And it's a project that is now being monitored and does touch-ups annually to ensure that it's not overtaking their nearshore habitats. And they've been very successful in bringing a number of species back, such as the least bidden, the eastern musk turtle, snapping turtles, painted turtles, sandhill cranes, and some bald eagles. The Anishinaabe Nation has established various mutual working relationships with the federal, provincial government, and other organizations, such as the Invasive Species Center. The goals of these relationships are to build trust, working relationships that support the First Nations in capacity building and deal with areas of issues or concern, create opportunities, develop solutions, develop toolkits or guides that can support the community in decision making, improve communication and dialogue and relations with others. We build a lot of different relationships, and the importance of these relationships is to spark engagement, discussion, sharing perspectives, and building the relationship overall. Understanding the community's needs and interests is important in creating collaboration relationships that address the issues of concern. First Nations, lands, waters, they all need to be monitored for invasive species. And right now, there's currently no regular monitoring in our communities except for a very few. So right now, the Anishinaabe Nation is building a new relationship with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to provide a mechanism of awareness and education on topics such as invasive species that's related to fish habitat. We also have provincial relationships, such as with the Ministry of Northern Development Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry. We have a Anishinaabe Ontario Resource Management Council, and sometimes topics like invasive species will come to these tables, but more of a policy awareness and information to collect feedback on those policies. We have new relationships emerging, such as this one with the Invasive Species Center. And we are here committed to support the center in providing awareness of invasive species to our 39 First Nations, provide comments back to invasive species of what has been found, seen on the landscape, share information on emerging invasive species with our communities that may impact resources relied on within the community. And then watch out and share opportunities that will benefit the Anishinaabe First Nations and the Invasive Species Center. The outcomes of these relationships that we build is we're building a nation-to-nation relationship. And when I mean by a nation-to-nation relationship, it can mean in various different terms. It could be the Anishinaabe Nation as a collective, building a relationship with a government, either provincially or federally. It could be the Anishinaabe Nation as a collective building a relationship with a nation such as a First Nation, because they are a nation, they have self-governance and they hold sovereignty. So they're a nation on its own. It could also be a First Nation to First Nation relationship, building a relationship. It also could be a government relationship with the First Nation. So it's very complex when you're talking about relationship building. However, these relationships are important because it provides a mechanism of sharing of information. There's different avenues such as joint councils, chief committees. We have bilateral leadership forums. We have regional roundtables. We have working groups, and these all support our 39 First Nation communities. As a department, we develop tools and best practices toolkits, templates. We provide input and submissions into regulations, policies, anything that supports the endeavors of the 39 communities. Our community of building these relationships with the governments or the communities also provides increased accountability. It provides that follow-up on actions that are promised either to the community or to the other nation. So it's very important. It also fosters relationships between the First Nations, academia, non-government organizations, stewardship initiatives, and it helps build capacity within the 39 First Nations. In the end, the Anishinaabe nations and the relationship building between all these different nations supports the better decision-making and capacity building for the First Nation. In summary, the Anishinaabe Nation territory is an area that is rich and diverse in ecology, habitat, fish, and wildlife. And sometimes our nation will join other communities in initiatives. And here we have a former employee who's joined a turtle release initiative with Meganwan First Nation. Some of these initiatives with First Nations are taking the support in identifying invasive species within areas of climate change and traditional resource monitoring. They're also looking at species at risk and how those are impacted by invasive species. These communities lack baseline monitoring. However, communities like Meganwan has thrived in baseline monitoring, environmental construction monitoring for invasive species. I believe they have toolkits and protocols for heavy equipment coming in their territory. And overall, these communities that are thriving and looking after their community territories or traditional territories, they're integrating their knowledge with Western science into research and management. We all know that invasive species is threatening the biodiversity, but it is also affecting the biodiversity of the Anishinaabe Nation, who has the most biological, which you could say, wildlife and plant diversity within Canada, because we have not really touched our reserves. So this is why it's important that we learn off each other, what's happening out on the landscape, either if it's on reserve, off reserve, traditional territory, regionally, or collective as the Anishinaabe Nation. We have to support each other as much as we can as we go through all these changes. So that's all I have for you today. And thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks so much, Rhonda. I'm going to ask if people could submit any questions. I should have mentioned this before we started. Submit any questions to the question box. Unlike the rest of the sessions, we're going to move through our presentations, and then we're going to have lots of time for questions after the presentations and our discussion period. So feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A box at any time through the presentations, and we'll go through those afterwards. So with that, thank you again, Rhonda. That was an excellent presentation, and I think a really great way to start off this session. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker now, Curtis Avery. Curtis is going to be talking about the North Shore Phragmites.
Okay, I'm there.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Mackenzie. Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Rhonda. Sorry. I'm not sure if we caught.
I think you just needed an introduction one more time, and then.
Okay, great. Curtis is the environmental officer at Nipissing First Nation, which he proudly calls his home. Growing up in Northern Ontario, in Sudbury and Nipissing First Nation, And observing the effects of man on the natural landscape has led Curtis to find an affinity in the relationships, networks, and interactions of the natural environment and man. A career path as a fisheries biologist and lands and resources coordinator has provided Curtis with the opportunity to work in many First Nations communities across Ontario. Now, using his expertise gained along the way, Curtis hopes to keep his home and region safe from invasive species. So Curtis, I will pass it over to you now, and looking forward to hearing about your program.
Perfect. So, yeah, let me just pull up my screen here. I seem to have lost you guys, unfortunately. So everyone can hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound great, Curtis.
Perfect. So my name is Curtis Avery. I'm the environmental officer for the Lands and Resource Department here at Nipissing First Nation. And today I'm going to be talking about some of the projects and initiatives we have going on right now involving some of our remote sensing capabilities and how we got involved in Phragmites. As Rhonda mentioned previous, a lot of First Nations are faced with impediments in terms of the capacity, funding and specifically proposal-based funding, which is only, short little spurts and doesn't really produce the capacity and sustainability that these First Nations, ones that the same sort of things that we require. So in order to grasp all the issues involving the environment, it's super important that we start these baseline studies and develop management planning regimes for the future. So with that, I'll get into it. So basically, what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit about the First Nation, the North Shore Reconnaissance Eradication pilot program that we got initiated with the Green Shovels Collaborative. And also, we're going to talk about some experience, the results, and some of the future aspirations that we hope to develop from this pilot program. So a little bit about Nipissing is we're located on Lake Nipissing between North Bay to the east and the municipality of the West Nipissing to the west. So you see here we're situated on the north shore of Lake Nipissing. We span over 30 kilometers from the west to the east. And although we span 30 kilometers, we have over 59 kilometers of shoreline. So there's a lot of area to manage, a lot of monitoring that might go into that. And overall, not only that, but we have a large land base with over 15,000 acres in size. And 20% of our land base is actually composed of wetlands. So when it comes to invasive species, it's always a concern to us, especially when those invasive species are involved with wetlands. And some of these wetlands are very significant to our staple food species and other cultural and resource values out there. And our people, we're Ojibwe and Algonquin descent. We have a population of about 3,000 citizens and about 933 members that are on reserve within the nation. So the North Shore Reconnaissance and Eradication Program, or NPREP, basically what we're doing is we're using a UAV or a Phantom 4 DJI tool. It's a new tool in our toolbox, essentially, to do some of these monitoring initiatives, whether it's baseline, using it for mapping exercises or delineating habitat. This is a first of its kind. It has novel uses in other fields like agriculture, and even transportation nowadays. So we're trying to use that novelness and apply it to some of the issues that we have here on the First Nation. So it's suitable for Nipissing to use this remote sensing or UAV because of the large shorelines that we have, the various habitat and vegetation types. It's an alternate to some of the shoreline cruise techniques and methodologies that we use. Obviously, there's still some limitations to when you can fly the UAV when it comes to weather, similar with a boat on the lake with the waves. But it's an alternative to doing that. And obviously, when you're planning these long shoreline cruises, it might get involved with some bad weather later on. So having a UAV, putting it up in the air for a short amount of time collecting large amount of data, not only on the target species, but you can bring that data back and analyze it in the future. So by doing some of this North Shore baseline work and monitoring, identifying these stands, we're also complementing some of our initiatives for the environmental management planning that we have going on right now, and it has been raised by community members as being important, the invasive species within our territory. So as you see, we have a long, very long shoreline that we have to monitor or start monitoring. We have some substrate data related to fisheries. Of course, we have a long data set of fisheries, but we're trying to move into the terrestrial realm of things in our monitoring initiatives. And then that transition from aquatic into terrestrial, we naturally are going from the shoreline into the forest, and we see Phragmites on these shorelines and wetlands. So how it all got started is we got some funding to do some in-house moose surveys that we successfully completed, and we were monitoring some of these wetlands in the area. We found that data acquisition was great. We could get out in the field and capture some baseline data that allowed us to really look at the state of the wetland as it currently is, and allow us to monitor perpetually into the future. So out of this came the concern, obviously these wetlands are significant to moose, and now we have a concern with some of the other findings we were observing, which was Phragmites on some of these wetlands. So we decided to apply to receive some funding in order to start and initialize the beginning steps of a monitoring program. So these are some of the ortho mosaics that we captured using the DJI Phantom 4 RTK. So in the beginning, we would go to these sites. We were doing these large surveys, but I would notice things from the shoreline, such as this. And you could clearly see in the backdrop of all the native plants that have entered dormancy for the fall. The Phragmites, even though some of the stalks might start to die back, the leaves are still green and producing that biomass. And as a result, they actually stick out really heavily in the background of the dormant vegetation. So the principles behind this was that, well, we're going to use photogrammetry to determine not only the size, where they are, but also to map these areas. And photogrammetry is a science of measuring from images. So if we know our position of our drone, our x-axis, our y, and our altitude, what we can do is we can actually use that to pinpoint. So we take these images as inputs, and we output measurements in a 2D or 3D sense. So for instance, the drone will capture a stand of Phragmites in one direction, but it doesn't give you enough information to pinpoint a location in 3D space. However, if you have multiple pictures, then you can begin to get some sort of an accurate location in the 3D world. But when you put more pictures into the mix, then you have higher accuracy, and you can pinpoint up to some of the ground sampling distance and measurements for these drones. You can produce pixels that on the ground represent, an individual pixel can represent 3 centimeters in reality. So you can get very high quality images that allow you to analyze, and the amount of information that you can obtain from these flights is phenomenal. So we use the Phantom RTK, and what this does is it utilizes a base station in conjunction with a GNS receiver on both the drone and the base station. So while it's receiving GPS location, it can correct for those in real time to give you very high accurate positioning of certain objects in the real world. Now, while this creates an in model of all of your pictures, what we then have to do is tie it to the real world. So we use ground control points. I have a ground control point here. This is nothing fancy. It's some dollar store cardboard. And basically what we're looking for is that contrast that I can find in the images. This would actually be measured using something like a GNS Trimble catalyst, which will fix those, will give you an accurate representation of where these are in the real world. And then you can input that into your third-party software to put all these images into a real world situation that has some sort of absolute accuracy to it. So here you can't see it, but there's a ground control point there in the picture and also down here in the picture. And we use those to anchor in our ortho images. So we use Pix4D to analyze most of our data, although that's not totally required. There is free software out there. So essentially, what we do here is we calibrate the cameras. The cameras will identify the points after we import our ground control points and rectify where the images are. And what it does is it'll tie these points in together and create a point cloud that you can then use to triangulate meshes, create digital surface elevation models, digital terrain models, and also if you want to get further into it, you can also do point cloud classification, which really ties up your model. So here we have green as our vegetation, our buildings. These are point clouds, and when we construct our 3D models, for instance, and we want contours of the land, it will not take into consideration some of these buildings and vegetation, and providing you with unique elevation data for the land. So that's again, there's lots of data that's acquired from this, and whether it's just targeting Phragmites like we were trying to do in these wetlands, there's the applications go a lot further, and you acquire a lot of data that can be used for other things such as land use planning and management, conservation sort of items. So one thing we found with these flights is, and one of the reasons why we applied for this funding is that although the flights could capture large amounts of area, for instance, we captured about 59 hectares of wetlands in Nipissing on the NPREP program, it requires a lot of processing power. So we need that processing power, that workstation that can analyze all these images. So about an hour's worth of flight captures about 59 hectares. Here's our results. So you can see this wetland from the Central Ontario Ortho Photography data that was done in the spring of 2016 against our ortho images. And you can zoom in here and have these high qualities determine where the frag, and you can see the frag sticks out quite a bit over the other vegetation. So it turned out to be a very useful tool, especially for mapping in the fall. So here's the wetlands we mapped, very large areas. And again, you can see the differences in the frag sticking out against the native vegetation there. So some considerations and experiences that we've learned so far is that, it takes for these two flights, it took about 5 hours of processing time. And what we would like to really reduce that time in order to make our program more efficient. So we need that processing power. We have, for about 870 pictures, we have 59 hectares that are examined. We have about 4 kilometers of shoreline that was captured in about 60 minutes. However, this can change based on our inputs and parameters. And from this, we found about 1,500 meters squared of invasive Phragmites. So it's useful for examining large areas. Mind you, you have to keep your drone. You have to have a certificate to fly the drone. You also have to fly the drone within visual line of sight. Sometimes you need a special flight operator certificate depending on where you're operating. So there's many considerations there. But generally, if you can see the aircraft, you're in good scenario. So the fall is the ideal time to observe some of these Phragmites we're finding, the invasive strain especially. Here on the right-hand side, you can see the native Phragmites, which is not as dense as some of the other frag, and it's also same sort of color as you see with the other vegetation. So this allows for on-the-fly monitoring in situations, and allows us to put together an early detection and rapid response program that we can use going forward. So the funding's paved the way for the initial invasive species monitoring program. So going forward, we're going to be mapping other areas, identifying the critical areas, mapping them, and we hope to start eradication this year with the initiatives that was provided to us from the Green Shovels Collaborative. So we're going to enhance our capabilities of capturing larger images. We have mobile assets like boats and equipment for our staff, and we're going to enhance our outreach around land use planning and invasive species interactions in the environment. So after we have enough information and data now that we can go to council and provide our recommendations, and hopefully we can start eradicating some of these early colonies before they spread into these critical wetlands. And obviously with that comes restoration, and there's some areas, within our territory where we have wild rice growing, not as abundant as it used to be, but these are the kind of species we want to consider when we're rehabilitating these areas. So with that, just some benefits with the UAV. So obviously you're collecting lots of data, even vegetation communities that you can analyze later for your forest characteristics, your metrics, and it's used for our forestry sector as well. Species at risk, a native species, so your terrestrial monitoring, your baseline species at risk habitat monitoring, areas for conservation, those mapping, and just your general monitoring. Land use planning, it's very important for that. We use the UAV for, prioritizing the use of certain areas, these critical habitats. Maybe we need to set them aside, protect them. It's used it's the drone and the data acquisition is all used in GIS, which is basic function of all of our land use planning and designing. And it's also used for our governance, right? Our policies, our habitat protection, conservation, and rehabilitation efforts within the nation. And again, as Rhonda mentioned, we're in the process of gathering baseline, just like a lot of other First Nations. So we want to capture that data now and then use that data also in the future to observe the dynamics on the land as it changes and the responses of the environment to the human interaction and even climate change. So lots of benefits from this. It's vertically, it can be used in lots of applications. So hopefully, you guys learned a little bit about what we're doing and might inspire some other First Nations to incorporate UAVs in their own sort of monitoring programs. And with that, I'll leave it at that. I'll take any questions. I'm not sure how much time I left, but Miigwech, thank you very much.
That's great, Curtis. Thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation and overview of, how drones work. I think there was a couple presentations earlier in the forum that talked about using drones, and I think that even was very helpful to me to learn about the background of it and how much work is involved in processing. There are a couple questions, but we're going to hold on those until the discussion period after. So we're going to move on to our next speaker, Tess. So Curtis, if you just want to unshare there, perfect. And then Tess, if as I'm giving your introduction, you can start sharing your screen. So Tess is going to be discussing, oh, you good, Tess?
Hi, good morning. I can hear you. I'm breaking up a little bit, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Great. Perfect. So I'll just give you a little intro and you can start sharing your screen with your slides.
For sure.
Okay. So Tess is going to be discussing the summer 2021 monitoring for emerald ash borer in Missinaba Cree territory. Tess is the Director of Lands and Resources for Missinaba Cree First Nation. She has over 20 years working in the field of natural resources, 17 years with the Ministry of Natural Resources, now Northern Development Mines, Natural Resources and Forestry in the field of forestry. 5 years as a natural resource manager for Algoma Central Railway and 2 years in Alberta with Sustainable Resource Development. She's a trapper of wild furs since a young adult, and she has a master's degree in public administration and degrees in education and English, and has a forestry technician diploma. So I'll let you take it away from here, Tess. Looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Miigwech, Nyawe, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm happy to present today on behalf of Missinaba Cree First Nation Lands and Resources Department. I've shared my screen. Can everybody see it, I hope?
Yeah, we can see it. If you just want to put it into presentation mode.
Slideshow mode, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Perfect. That looks great.
Seems, okay, but I want to get rid of this, and I have to get rid of
You
this
see your
somehow.
notes screen or your presenter view? I think there's a toggle at the top where you can change the display settings. And if you duplicate, you should have the same screen on both.
Like up here? You're probably not.
Yeah, it would be
this.
At the top.
Hide the thumbnail. There we go. That's better. Anyway, I can maybe try to push this down. No, I can't. Okay, that's all right. I think I can make do with this. So good morning, everyone. And I will begin by telling you that I'm going to speak today about our 2021 Emerald Ash Borer Monitoring Project. So to give some context first, however, I will say that Missinaba Cree First Nation is a very unique First Nation of approximately 500 members. They're unique because they were displaced from their homelands, which is around Chapleau Game Preserve. I'll try to show you a map in a minute, if I can toggle out and toggle back in off this presentation. So hopefully you're mostly familiar with Ontario and Northern Ontario. Chapleau Game Preserve is between Wawa and Chapleau, sort of north, just north of the 101. And there's a highway 651 that comes off of 101 about halfway between Wawa and Chapleau, and skirts north from there to Missinaba. And Missinaba is a little town of about, I think there's 12 or 20 permanent residents in the town of Missinaba proper, and there's a railway that goes through. It's Canadian Pacific, and largely that's what established this as a town of the 20 permanent residents. But if we go back to the late 1800s, there was a fur post there, Hudson's Bay fur post. So there was, it was part of the whole fur trade route. And so the people came down from Moose Factory, the James Bay lowlands, through the waterways of Missinaba River. There's a height of land. That's where the Missinaba River flows north to the James Bay. There's a height of land and a portage right there, and comes down into Dog River. And then that flows all the way down to Lake Superior around Mishpacotton River, which is Wawa. So the people, not only were they displaced from the lands with the establishment of the Chapleau Game Preserve early in the 1920s, sorry for that, the Chapleau Game Preserve establishment in the 1920s, but the governments never really wanted to recognize them as their own distinct peoples from that of Moose Factory. So they fought hard over the 90 years to get recognized as a distinct community that lived around the Dog Lake area, the fur trade post of Missinaba. And it wasn't until 2011, I hope you can still hear me okay, I'm seeing my internet connection is unstable, that they were granted 15 square miles of by the Ontario government, but that's only of an initial allotment based on their membership. Current demographic at the time is how they do those calculations so they got 15 square miles in 2011 of 70 square miles that they're actually entitled to. It wasn't until 2018 that the federal government finally gave them that land disposition as a federal reserve. So 2018 is now just a few years ago. And so here we are today. a year ago, the Lands and Resources Department got established, and January 11th was my starting day. And I've since then recruited and staffed up with 3 technicians and hope to further furnish this department and do more and more. So, and that's all they're part of Treaty 9. If you're wondering which treaty the Missinaba Cree are signatories to. So that said, let's move into so this is really an inaugural first project for the Lands and Resources Department. It was early in February. There was a call to, so if I go like this, okay. So it was in February, March, I saw the call via invasive species for the grants, and I said I'd love to jump in and have a first project. So keeping that in the context of this 15 square miles up in between Wawa and Hawk Junction, that is still pristine land. They have not yet resettled there. They're hoping to resettle, and they're hoping to resettle. We're working out reserve creation as we speak, and hope to have a road built. But right now it's pristine, well, relatively pristine forest. It has been harvested by timber companies, SFL holders. However, for the most part, there is no roads into it right now. They've all been decommissioned. There's only one small Island View camp, we call it. That's the only infrastructure in the reserve. It's comprised of 10 cabins and a multi-purpose center. So there are no community members living on the reservation proper at this time. We hope to have them resettled in the coming years. So let's jump into the project. The purpose of the project is to survey for the presence of emerald ash borer up in the Dog Lake area within Missinaba Cree's territories, their traditional territories. It was set up, largely like, let's get familiar with the reservation. Me being new to the Lands and Resources and to working for Missinaba Cree, I want to understand the geography. And so understanding too that emerald ash borer is just reaping havoc all over Ontario, Southern Ontario. Let's have an understanding of whether this beetle can be up in the Dog Lake area. So, there was that initial exercise undertaken canvassing Natural Resources Canada about the emerald ash borer and the extent of its range. Learning that, most likely it's not as far as Dog Lake. They figured right now they have sort of proved recorded evidence of the beetle going as far as Chippewa Falls on the Highway 17, just north of Sault Ste. Marie, but none that have been actually identified or evidence found north of that area. The postulation or the hypothesis is that it's too cold for them to sustain life up there. So we wanted to get an understanding of how we can actually monitor for the presence of this beetle, and understand where there might be ash trees within the reservation and the traditional territories. So if the emerald ash borer were to be found, thereafter we would develop and implement a strategic plan for abatement of the emerald ash borer. Okay, so just to give a little bit of background about emerald ash borer, I'm not sure the audience here today and their understanding of the beetle. I think I just saw Dan Rowlandson on there, so he could probably jump in and give a whole presentation about the beetle. But it's killing white and black ash, and it's just decimating them. They're gone. As Sault Ste. Marie used to have them all down Queen Street, and they've all been cut down now because they're all dead. So I think it's such a high mortality rate of the white and black ash stands that they've just were put on the species at risk list, and then they've recently been taken off. I'm not really sure the status there, but at the time of this project being conceptualized, they were certainly just being added. And also at the time, I was there's a engineering studies being undertaken to initiate reserve creation, infrastructure development. And Telek Engineering did a feasibility study on where to put the subdivision lots to have people return to live there and reside on reserve. And in doing so, they had to look at, they had to survey for species at risk, the Canada warbler being one, bat, the long-eared and the little brown myotis, the turtle, the snapping turtle, and then they came across some black ash stands. And they noted the black ash stands. They said that this is unusual and rare for this area. They're less than 10 hectares in size. And so that's all they noted, because it wasn't, the black ash weren't added to the list at the time. However, they're of significance, these little tiny black ash stands. Some will say, well, there's only a couple, but they're of significance to Indigenous people from way back. And it's not so much the Missinaba Cree, maybe further down into the United States. It was a lot more common. The trees were more plentiful, that they would use black ash for basket making. There's a traditional practice of taking the black ash and shaking them, so pounding them so that the bark separates, and then you can have these pieces that then you can weave into baskets. And so we still hope to carry forward this project into some learning of traditional practices. There is one member's grandmother lives around Garden River area, down just east of Sault Ste. Marie, and has some memory of some of the ancestors making weaving baskets from black ash. So it's a lost art that we hope to resurrect. And so the black ash are of cultural significance to the Missinaba Cree in that manner. And so it, we want to be able to protect and if anything is attacking or hurting the existing small rare pockets on reservation, we would ensure that we try everything we can to protect them from being, their demise in the forest. So like I said, it's current distribution of the emerald ash borers as far as Chippewa Falls in terms of the actual official federal record of, and that our hypothesis is that we would hope that we're not going to find any there, but Natural Resources Canada wasn't too sure. They said that it's possible we could, having been brought in by firewood. There's a number of camps, like the fly-in fishing camps and established camps. Ernie's Lodge is at Missinaba. So a lot of firewood does get brought in, and that's all it would take is bringing some infected with emerald ash borer into the area. There's also some studies being undertaken at the University, I think, of Western Ontario. Might be wrong about that because the conference is over a year ago now, where there's a woman who's researching increasingly cold resistant strains of emerald ash borer. So just like everything, they get used to the digs and they move further north, they put their fur coats on and and they're able to withstand and survive. So that would be bad for this area. So our preliminary project activities, identify the black ash stands within and adjacent to the reservation. And then we got some in-kind training and loan of funnel traps from NRCan. Two lovely people provided us some training of how to get those funnel traps up into the trees. Jean Jones, and I forget the fellow's name at this time. And there was also outreach to the community undertaken. That was sort of to set the stage for this project to be undertaken. So the top picture here, I've got my cursor on, is actually Missinaba Cree's reservation area. Oh, I was going to jump out and show you a larger context. I'm sorry, I didn't. So this is just north of Missinaba, the town proper, just about 3 kilometers to the north. And the pink is the actual 15 square miles. This is the little road. This is the only little road that comes into the reservation at this time to this island view camp I was talking about. The red hatched here, you're saying, and blue hatches are all part of the feasibility study undertaken by TELIC for where their initial subdivision lots are going to go, with this line right here being the proposed spine road. So if we go look at the bottom of this aerial photo below that, it's sort of a blow up of, oops, I want to go back. So this is a blow up. If you think about this as pink, the pink on the top is a bear. Missinaba Cree First Nations emblem is a bear, 3 bears. This looks like a bear, and this is like the snout and the eye of a bear. So if you go down here, this is still the snout of the bear. Hopefully everyone can see that. This is Highway 651 coming in. So you turn left to go to Missinaba, and you turn right to go to IVC and into the reservation. This is that proposed road. And so TELIC Engineering identified some black ash right here. So IVC's right here, take a boat, which is what we did, took a boat around to this black ash stands. Well, initially we went in on the trail and walked in and found them. And then we realized, well, we can go by boat. So we went by boat to do it. This little over here, so to the right, when we say that we extended to the traditional territories just to have more sample plots dispersed. So this is the boat launch area. It's a public, used to be owned by the Ministry of Natural Resources. I don't know if it still is, but a lot of Missinaba Cree members like to have their trailers here because they're still awaiting kind of moving back, resettling, so they spend seasonal time here. And so there's a couple black ash right in here. And then this square here, so we wanted another site, and in collaboration with Wakatoan General Management Inc. So Wakatoan is forestry kind of, it's an organization established, and there's 3 sister First Nations, Missinaba Cree, Chapleau, Brunswick House, and Chapleau Cree First Nation. So the 3 are sort of organized under Wakatoan, and it's mainly to assist and support all aspects of forestry consultation that needs to be undertaken with the First Nations. And they mentioned to us that there was that they have come across a few black ash stands just north of Chapleau on the Lafreniere Road, north of the mills, if you're familiar. And so we said, oh, that would be great. We'll extend and have another sample plot there. So we worked with the Guardians, and the Guardians are a youth program, summer program. So we dovetailed it in to have some, offer some partnership with this youth program, and also to take them out and show them what we've learned about putting up funnel traps and how to survey for insects. Because at the same time, we were also surveying for emerald ash borer, we realized that these neat funnel traps could also survey for all insect biodiversity. They're pheromone based. So I'll speak a little bit to that. I apologize that I don't have the videos. I wish I'd taken it with my phone, and I'll let you know that's one of my lessons learned, is that I don't have that video. I've requested, I haven't been able to track it down, but we did take a video of Jean Jones and Herk and the other man that was there to assist us with how to put these funnel traps up. So they lent us 20, we ended up using 10 because we realized that this is too much. Too much of a time commitment, but 20 funnel traps, and they're these when they extend out, they're about I'd say 3.5 feet long, and the idea is to get them somehow up into a tree, up into like the top. You want to get the top 3/4 up into the canopy, and you want to have it a mature ash tree. It's 60 feet, 70 feet high. It's a ways up there, and the idea was to go up with a forestry one of those pole pruner where you stack the poles and they keep going up, and then you have a rope, and the rope clips over, and you have a little plumb that you kind of tick over and then it falls down with the rope. And so essentially now you've got a sling up and over a branch of an ash tree. Very challenging. So we practiced this and we have it on video, and I do not have the video to share or any pictures. I'm sorry about that. But we got the 10 traps, and we're also in kind provided the pheromone. There's these little pheromone patches, and essentially like they smell like really, really green cut grass. And the idea is that it just attracts and specifically the emerald ash borer during their time of breeding, which is in late July to September, October. So that's the targeted time that we went out and did these surveys. Need to be kept frozen until you install them. And it's just a little patch that we would like use a zip tie it on the funnel trap, and up it would go. So community outreach is the last of those preliminary activities that was undertaken. May 11th, we had what I'm hoping to be more of, so I called it the Sacred Tree series, but this first speaker series was about the black ash being threatened. And I think since then it's been lowered off the threatened list, but I have yet to find out exactly what's happening with that. And we had some guest speakers come to that. So we had the Invasive Species Center, the executive, the CEO, the director of, come and introduce the Invasive Species Center here. That's centered, they are located within the Natural Resources Canada federal building at the back side of it. There's a partnership there. And so she introduced the Invasive Species Center, and then the technician, Dave, I have his name here, that last name is really Dudkowitz. David Dudkowitz is an expert in the emerald ash borer, so he provided facts and a lovely presentation that showed, how to look for signs of the emerald ash borer, looking for holes in the sides of the ash trees. The ash trees would grow these little branches out the side to show that they're weakening, that they're having difficulty doing their photosynthesis. So they'd get these little nudges out the side, or little tiny branches. There's a specific name for them. I don't have it with me today, but
maybe give Tess just a second here. I think she was saying she had a choppy internet connection this morning. Tess, if you can hear me, maybe you can go off video for now, and that might help your connection a little bit. Oh, looks like we lost her. Okay, well, let's wait for, while we wait for Tess. Oh, maybe she's here.
I think I lost connection. Am I being heard again?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
You were talking about outreach.
Okay, so so we had the guest speaker webinar for the community. So it was community based. We invited via our mechanisms or communication, Facebook, everything's virtual right now. We're all getting used to that. And so it was a virtual Zoom webinar held on May 11th. And we had the 3 guest speakers come to that. The Invasive Species Center came, an expert to talk about emerald ash borer facts. We had Victoria Leck come from Environment and Climate Change Canada to talk about how black ash is listed as a species at risk, and in general, the whole species at risk spectrum of classifications. And then there was also a speaker that came from the National Tree Seed Center that's in New Brunswick. Because initially we were going to try to collect black ash seeds as part of the project. However, we found out that the tree was not in its optimal year to have seeds. Like everything else that ebbs and flows, it wasn't at its climatic year in terms of having an abundance of seed and viable seed. So we forewent that as one of the project activities. However, and it is again an optimal year for tree seed collection, we're going to undertake that activity. To assist the National Tree Seed Center, they don't have any of the genetic seed from that area. We had our feasibility study. We had, you know, the Wakatoans, the Guardians told us where there was some black ash. So we went out and actually found the trees and GPSed them. We used so how did we use that engineer's feasibility study? We also used geographic forest resource inventory shapefile and pulled up the likely stands for black ash. Stands are in the, and then we went about deploying our traps. So the M&R said in that particular first stand, which is on the reservation that we went to by boat, and we had deployment of 2 traps north of Chapleau on that Lafreniere Road. Then inspecting, collecting of specimens occurred throughout July, August, with 3 times total, and recovery of all the traps was in the last week of August. There's just some pictures of the Guardians, what the funnel trap looks like up in the ash tree.
Tess, we can't see your slides.
Oh, I've lost the share when I lost the connection. Okay, hang on. Okay, wait.
And then I might recommend too, if you could go off video, it might give you a better connection.
Oh, for sure. Happily. Okay, let's start with that.
We don't want to see you, but
no, and I don't like to be rude and not show, but I'm honestly I'm tired of looking at myself. Okay, so I gotta share again. Hang on. Sorry. Okay.
There
okay,
we go.
Are we back, Sherry?
Yeah.
Okay. Slideshow. From this slide. So I was talking, I think you'd already seen this slide. This was kind of the poster, the outreach. Okay, great. And so we went out and identified the black ash stands using the resources we had. That was fairly easy to find them, but there weren't a lot. Like when they said less than 10 hectares, I mean, there was like maybe 15 trees in that one stand on the reservation. Boat doctors, only a couple. And then we deployed the traps. So BA1 is that site on reservation that we went to by boat, and then the M&R dock outside of Missinabie, and deployed 2 traps at just north of Chapleau on the Lafreniere Road August 5th. And then thereafter, we were inspecting, collecting specimens from those traps on 3 different occasions. And then we recovered all the traps at the last week of August. So then the pictures here just show some of those traps up in the tree. And these were the Guardians here, a picture of the Guardians. That would have been in Chapleau, just north of Chapleau. And so to monitor them every two to 3 weeks, to just kind of give you an idea, like you lower the trap down and you use a coffee out the insects that were caught in the antifreeze, essentially propylene glycol, and label it, and we would record any observations. And then we would put the trap back up. So we did that essentially 3 times with that first stand, and the boat at the boat dock. The boat dock, the last time we went to collect it, had been dumped out, so we didn't get a specimen capture from that. And the ones north of Chapleau were only inspected once. We'd kind of given direction to have the Guardians check them once on their own, but their schedule was such that they never had the chance to do that for us. So we just ended up collecting them once.
I don't want to cut you off, but I do just want to make sure that we have time to get to Chris's presentation and the questions as well.
Okay.
So I'll give you another minute or so to wrap up, if that's okay.
Yeah, this is my last 2 slides. So
okay, great.
Yeah. So of the 14 samples that were taken over the 7 weeks and 3 inspections, there was no presence of emerald ash borer was detected. There was lots of bees and wasps, moths and butterflies, and no spiders. I thought that was an interesting find. So we did get down to sort of having that sort of coarse filter classification for some biodiversity understanding of what is flying around on the reservation. Is an important one. So the equipment may not always be suitable. So we had to buy our own pruning poles. We did not get those. My internet, I hope you can still hear me. I hope I'm not going unstable again, but lessons learned. So pruning poles, ours were unworkable. We ordered ours from the States. It was difficult to get, but they were too, so whereas NR cans were short and they were nicely stackable, these weren't stackable at all. They were 6 feet long, and so I'd have to get them all cut down. So we had to throw the plumb bob up into the tree to get them, and that was really challenging. Don't rely on third parties to collect your samples or keep your traps from being tampered. So like I say, the Guardians didn't get out to check, and there was another one set up on reservation. We asked them not to tamper with it, like at the IBC, and it was taken down because they believed that it was attracting mosquitoes. I would have one person appointed to taking videos and photographs, because a lot of the photographs that were taken, even though we tried to compile them, weren't readily available at the time of me trying to put together this presentation. Careful storing of pheromone is critical. So there was a point where we didn't have them in the freezer, and so they were no longer as active as it needed to be, the pheromone. And then balancing your workload commitments. So forecast the time commitment that's required for the project. Really, it needed more time, and we got flooded with other work. So we did our best to still do monitoring, but I feel like if we had more time afforded, it would have been better. And maybe going forward in a few years' time, where we think emerald ash borer may have moved in with climate change, we'll have another chance to do a more fulsome job of the monitoring project and we'll be a little bit experienced with it. So that's it. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Tess. That was great. We're going to move on to our last speaker now, Chris Herk. So if you could just unshare your screen there, Tess, and I'll get Chris to start sharing his. Perfect. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us today. Chris is going to be talking about the zebra mussel early detection in Treaty 3. Chris Herk is an environmental monitoring coordinator for Grand Council Treaty 3. He coordinates Grand Council Treaty 3's invasive species monitoring, water quality monitoring, and fish habitat monitoring programs for the 28 First Nation communities in Treaty 3. He has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental and Natural Resources and has over 10 years experience working across Canada in the field of wildlife conservation before settling into his role at the TPU. He is excited to work with the Treaty 3 communities and expand on invasive species monitoring and initiatives with them. So with that, Chris, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you for that. I just want to confirm that you can see my screen and hear me.
Yeah, everything is great.
All right, awesome. Well, just as a note, if I'm a little brief on anything here, please feel free to ask for me to expand in the question period. But like Mackenzie said, I work for Grand Council Treaty 3 as the Environmental Monitoring Coordinator. So just a little background information on Treaty 3 specifically. It's all the way up in very northwestern Ontario. The Treaty 3 territory expands into southeastern Manitoba, but predominantly in northwestern Ontario. And yeah, we have 28 communities within it. And Grand Council is the traditional government of the Anishinaabe Nation of Treaty 3, with the goal of protection, preservation, and enhancement of treaty and Aboriginal rights. And then specifically within Grand Council, we have a lot of different departments. We have a social department, health department, treaty and Aboriginal rights department, but specifically mine is the territorial planning unit, where all environmental work kind of comes out of. And we're guided by Manitou, Aki, and Okanagan, which translates to the Great Earth Law. And that kind of guides us in working towards asserting Treaty 3 environmental jurisdiction and inherent rights across the treaty. So from the TPU, we have a lot of initiatives coming from it, a lot on the traditional government side, climate change adaptation, anything related to natural resources, hunting and trapping, sustainable energy is a newer one for us, and environmental monitoring, which is my role within the TPU. So speaking to aquatic invasive species in general for Treaty 3, the map on the previous slide was the Treaty 3 territory. This map here is of the Winnipeg River Basin, so the watershed, a sub-watershed within the Lake Winnipeg watershed. And it essentially encompasses all of Treaty 3 territory, except that it dips a little bit down into the United States side. So it's an international watershed, and it's also an interprovincial watershed. So it's a little bit unique in that. And so what that means is we have a lot of issues coming together that really brings in a lot of aquatic invasive species to the area. So on the Minnesota side, all the water flows north into Treaty 3 territory. So, any aquatic invasive species down there, can slowly make their way up into Treaty 3 territory. Winnipeg is just a short 2.5 hour drive away from the Kenora area, Treaty 3 area. And Treaty 3 area, has Lake of the Woods, Shoal Lake, Black Sewell, Rainy Lake, I think a bit of Namakan Lake. And it's really kind of like a premier fishing destination, outdoor recreation area. So it brings in, hundreds of thousands of tourists through the area yearly boating. And, as we've heard through a lot of the other presentations earlier in this week, incoming boats means a lot of aquatic invasive species spread. So I'm not really going to go too in depth on a lot of these species here for aquatic invasives. Again, we've heard about them over previous presentations, but just in the Treaty 3 area, we have spiny water flea, rusty crayfish is everywhere, purple loosestrife, flowering rush, clearwater crayfish is here. I've heard that paper crayfish is here. We have a hybrid cattail, rainbow smelled emerald ash borer, so many invasive species. I guess not all emerald ash borer is not aquatic, but I'll just throw that one in there. And zebra mussel. But what I will speak to for impacts is a lot of these species, when we're not talking about invasive species from a First Nation standpoint, the cultural impact of them isn't really mentioned for First Nations. So from a Treaty 3 perspective, rusty crayfish, for instance, that has a big impact on traditional food sources such as wild rice, very voracious feeders on aquatic vegetation. So wild rice is one of them. Purple loosestrife, flowering rush leading back to wild rice, it crowds out growing areas and just really impacts wild rice populations, which are already under threat from water level fluctuations. That's a whole different presentation in itself. And, if we get all the way down to zebra mussel, that's going to have impacts on walleye. So again, traditional food source, thousands of lakes in the area, used since time immemorial by the First Nations in Treaty 3 for fishing. And again, a whole other presentation itself, the walleye fishery on Lake of the Woods in particular is very stressed. So, there's commercial fishing, hundreds of thousands of recreational fishers. And then if you add in, zebra mussels, spiny water fleas, it's just impacting walleye and other fish populations even more. So a lot of impact on traditional food sources from aquatic invasive species. So speaking to zebra mussels in particular in Treaty 3, 2018 was kind of the first year where, newsworthy stuff was coming out of the Treaty 3 territory for them being found. Obviously, Lake Winnipeg has lots of zebra mussels in it. And it wasn't until 2018 in Shoal Lake, which is on the western side of Treaty 3, where a water sample was taken and a single zebra mussel veliger was found within the sample from Shoal Lake. And just if anyone's not familiar, when I'm talking about a veliger, so I have like a life cycle picture here of a zebra mussel. So it starts at an egg, and when the egg hatches, it comes out as the juvenile zebra mussel known as a veliger, and it's essentially like a little blob free floating in the water. It eventually settles down and grows into an adult. So one of those was found in Shoal Lake. Then in 2019, veligers were found in Lake of the Woods water samples taken by Minnesota DNR. So, one of the small benefits of having kind of that transboundary watershed is, more resources from, different governments being put towards water monitoring. So through Minnesota DNR, I'm not sure how many samples they took, but within those samples, between 4 and 186 veligers per sample were found. 2020, pandemic year, I'm not sure if the zebra mussels took a break from spreading around, or maybe just impacted sampling by Minnesota DNR. I don't think MNRF from Ontario has been doing sampling. So no news on the spread of them in 2020, but in 2021, monitoring's picking up again. And veligers were found in the Rady Lake water samples, again, taken by Minnesota DNR. And so not sure the numbers on those, but 4 out of the 5 samples had zebra mussel veligers in them. So what can we take away from this? It's likely before 2018 that, zebra mussels were within Treaty 3 waters, within the watershed, but that's just kind of the first year where water samples are being taken with them found in it. So important to note, it's only been veligers that have been found in Treaty 3 waters, in the transboundary waters, no adults. But my thought on that is, if you're finding, and I think this is most people's thoughts, if you're finding, 184 veliger samples in a water sample, even though it's on the southern side, Minnesota side of Lake of the Woods, it's very likely that there's an adult population established in there. And, if we link that to Shoal Lake, realistically, what are the chances of, taking a water sample and getting one veliger that just happened to fall off an unwashed boat? Very unlikely. So, there very likely could be a small adult zebra mussel population established in Shoal Lake. One thing to note is it's theorized zebra mussels could have a hard time flourishing in Treaty 3 waters, like the woods waters, due to low calcium levels in the water. It's theorized high tannin levels may have an impact. Again, that's just a theory. And lake sturgeon are also in the area which feed on mussels. So that could have impacts on populations as well. Again, it's just theorized. So no real numbers to put towards any evidence there. So what this all means for Grand Council in the work that we're doing is, doing a little bit of a gap analysis. There's no treaty-wide monitoring in place for zebra mussels, whether it's for veligers or adults. It does exist at a community level for some First Nations. I think Shoal Lake 40, after having found that that veliger in a water sample, like they've been doing more water samples for zebra mussels, but no results to report on. And there's a single NGO within the Kenora area that's been doing similar work to what we're doing here, which we're about to talk about. So during 2021, Grand Council, using an invasive species center micro grant for $1,000, started up an early version of a zebra mussel early detection program. So picture on the right, again, we only had $1,000. So thinking to ourselves, what can have the highest impact, the farthest reaching effect for $1,000? We decided to build zebra mussel settlement samplers, which essentially it can be like literally anything. It's just, you have to offer kind of an area for a veliger, a zebra mussel veliger, to settle on and grow on. So a settlement sampler. I found this design off of Minnesota DNR, pulling through again. Just using PVC plastic plates, a metal eye bolt capped on the end with a metal bolt with PVC plastic spacers in between. You can build those for, I think it costs about $12 per unit for us. The only issue there is you have to buy the PVC plates in bulk. So, we have thousands of those now. But really, essentially, the program is focused on education and capacity building and having Treaty 3 members monitoring local waters for adult zebra mussel presence using the samplers. So hanging them off a local dock, their own personal dock, and, just checking it once a season, once a month. All you have to do is just pull it up by the rope that it's hanging on, visually inspect it to see if there's adult zebra mussels there, and reporting information back to Grand Council. And we do have little information tags just with a picture of what a zebra mussel looks like, what to do if you spot one, just so participants are still familiarized with what to do with the results. So how we focus on the education and capacity building through other funding, Grand Council, the Territorial Planning Unit, we host regional community engagement sessions within communities, focused on environmental monitoring, where participants discuss environmental concerns around the community, learn how to monitor quality, identifying monitoring areas. But we also decided to put a focus on aquatic invasive species with those, specifically towards the zebra mussel settlement samplers. So at each of those engagement sessions, pictured on the right there, youth attending, adults attending, we work with them to build the settlement samplers, talk about the impacts of zebra mussels, where they can hang them in their community, what to do if they spot, zebra mussels growing on them, and just kind of keep building capacity that way. So 2021 was the first year for this. A little bit of results for it. We had 11 of the 28 Treaty 3 communities participating during 2021. 32 zebra mussel settlement samplers were placed in community waters. Not all communities had the same amount. For instance, Whitefish Bay, they have two main docks on two different lakes, Lake of the Woods and Dogpaw Lake. So we had two each there, whereas, one community, requested just one specifically. So yeah, not all evenly spread amongst the communities. But more importantly, no reported sightings of adult zebra mussels attached to the settlement samplers. We had a picture sent in here on the left. So, on closer inspection, there were some freshwater mollusks growing on it, but just based on the markings of the young ones there, they do not look like zebra mussels. So there was no cause for concern. And there's also apparently, with water level fluctuations, some people are having them go down into the mud when previously hung up in the water. So, maybe some placement issues there to work towards in the future. And so what that means for future plans, like I said, we had, I think, well over 1,000 PVC plates left. So we can still build more zebra mussel sediment samplers, over 2022, work with more communities to have them placed out. We also want to expand invasive species monitoring, not just to aquatic invasive species, but I guess focusing on aquatic invasive species right now. We would like to do water samples for veligers, kind of like what the Minnesota DNR is doing. And it was mentioned yesterday during one of the presentations, mobile boat cleaning stations are a thing. So we're looking into options for having, purchasing and creating one of those for popular Treaty 3 boat launches. And also expanding, again, invasive species efforts. One thing on the horizon is creating a purple loose stripe mapping and removal program. And, perhaps that's a topic for a future conference. So I think it sounds like I'm the last presenter. So if you have any questions for me or any of the other presenters, I guess we'll move into that now. Don't want to take over your job here, Mackenzie. So
no, that's great. Great segue. Thank you so much. I do know that we're running a little bit behind on time, but I think with these great projects, it was really important to get everybody's information in about all of their projects. So we are going to go a little bit into lunch to go through the questions that were submitted. But if anybody does have to go at lunch before we start, I do just want to give one more plug for Anishinaabe Nations forum that they're hosting I think it's about 12 days. You can get more information about this at landsandresources.ca, and I'll drop the link into the chat for that. So with that, we'll get into the questions. Oh, Curtis was answering questions in the chat already, I see. Okay. So Jay says, great presentation and great work. Have you considered using eDNA to help your monitoring efforts? Perhaps to help delineate areas of known presence and absence and to inform control efforts? I'm guessing this was a question for Chris based on the time that it was submitted. But I think it could apply to everyone.
Yeah, I guess I could speak to it first. No, we haven't used eDNA. Well, I guess considered. So we haven't considered it yet. Again, speaking towards capacity and gaps, we do have to acquire more funding. So it's something we could look towards in the future. We have used eDNA for stuff in the past for cabin benthic sampling. So it's something that we do look favorably on. So if the funding's there, it's definitely something we could do.
Okay, awesome. We're also going to be having an eDNA panel for community science later this afternoon, if anybody's interested in checking that out. Curtis, did you want to talk about any of the questions that you answered in the Q&A?
Sure. If you wanted to,
there were some really great questions there. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to throw them off, and I can.
Yeah, sure. So was there a specific reason that you chose fall, or did you experience or plan to try any other season?
Yeah, so the fall was chosen because, as I said, a lot of the it's invasive. It's not normal to the sort of evolution of our native plants and fauna. So like you can see it on the landscape very clearly in the fall when all the other native vegetation has died. So this allows us to prepare for the next season, and where we want to cut underneath the water at that high level in June, July, when the plant's sort of reinitiating all its nutrients, trying to get those shoots out so we can starve them under the water. And in order to prepare for it, you do it, in the fall, right? So it complements that program and scheduling.
Okay, great. And then the question about satellite monitoring. So we had Catherine say that they use satellite monitoring at their local lake, and she asked if they think that satellite imaging could be used in addition to or in place of drone imaging.
Yeah, so satellites are nice, and yeah, they do have, the great thing about satellites is they have many other sensors on them that allow us to define if plants are healthy or what kind of vegetation communities are there. But we don't all have access to satellites. I don't know any First Nation has a space program yet. And these can be expensive, and you can't get them right when you want. With a drone UAV, you can get it on the fly when you need it, and to capture that specific snapshot in time. Yeah. So an MTO has used it to satellite and the COOP data to identify frag within the corridors and stuff like that. So it has been used, and yeah, you can use it. But it does require capacity. You got to train individuals and ground truthing, so they correctly identify what they're seeing in the imagery, and also your ground sampling distance is super important. A drone can give you a pixel. So an individual pixel is 3 centimeters in the real world. That's how accurate. You don't necessarily get that with satellite imagery. So it's harder to delineate what you're looking at.
I don't know much about that kind of technology, but that seems pretty good to me. One pixel is 3 centimeters.
And there's one more question I'll answer, because in case you ask me, what kind of programs we use Pix4D. If I can share my screen real quick, I'll show you. So Pix4D is the software we use, but we also do cloud-based. They also have a cloud-based software. So in this image, we use, here's a wetland that we've monitored. And you can upload all this data right from the drone, even in the field, into the cloud, and it will process images for you and get you what you need. So here's an ortho mosaic of the time, and as you can see, you can zoom in fairly fairly quick, fairly high, but if you need better assistance, you can use the inspector. And what this does is it allows you to really look at what you're doing, whether you're looking at the habitat, you know, you can zoom in, the quality is great. So each pixel is about 3 centimeters, right? It's a ground sampling distance. So it provides unique things, and also you can do your, you know, digital surface models to see what it looks like on the ground, your elevation. This takes in the vegetation, however, and of course you can do your 3D sort of rendering and share. This is great for sharing with your colleagues and stuff, and working together to kind of look at, you know, planning, land use planning, and it's pretty handy stuff. Pretty neat. Here's the point clouds of. This is basically what the camera picks up and creates the points in 3D space with it. So yeah, that's what I'd like to share, and thank you very much.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so we did have another question come in for Chris. Are you considering water sampling to determine high-risk water bodies? We are looking to monitor pH and calcium to make a map of high-risk areas of zebra mussel invasion.
It's something that we haven't considered yet. So I know you can do water monitoring, like you mentioned, for calcium. And I believe it's, you know, where lower calcium is found, like it could mean higher risk for zebra mussels, especially with established populations. But going back to what's theorized with, you know, waters in Treaty 3, given the geology in the area, you know, there is a lot less calcium in the water. So I'm not sure what that would look like in terms of, you know, being able to establish what a high risk area is like if we already have low calcium. But again, it's something that we can always look to in the future.
Great, thanks, Chris. Tess, I have a question for you. I was wondering if you have any concerns about other invasive species introductions as you're looking to rebuild your community on the Missinaba Reserve.
That's not something I've had a lot of deep thought about. We're hoping to do a bat project this coming summer with the support of VCCC and acoustics monitoring, wildlife acoustics, because there's a mine site to the north where we'd like to look at you know, bats that may have been potentially impacted by the white nose syndrome. So I had thought and wondered whether white nose syndrome is an invasive, but otherwise, no. And I would be interested to know what other potential invasives that I may need to be thinking about. If the audience have any suggestions. I mean, zebra mussels, I guess, could come into the lakes if they were being brought up from boats, recreational boaters that, you know, were in the St. Mary's, for example. And so I guess there's some potential there. We're going to go to a conference next week that from Garden River has a water monitoring program, and I think that they may be looking at some of that. So if there is potential for zebra mussels, we could certainly contemplate that. Streams and tributaries that have lamprey eels. I've been told by the lamprey eel specialist here in the Sioux that eels are in every single stream and tributary in Ontario, and I was absolutely stunned to hear that. So that's something that we may also consider down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was thinking that it's probably a pretty unique situation, especially thinking about our viewers in Southern Ontario in pretty urban areas to have such a pristine piece of land.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, we want to do everything we can to protect that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to keep it that way, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I don't have any other questions coming in, other than lots of comments coming in the chat about your amazing presentations and thanking you all for sharing about your presentations today. So if you would like to wrap up and there's no further questions, I think that's a wonderful end to the day, or end to the morning, I guess, not the day. So thank you so much to all of our Indigenous communities that have come to present on their amazing work today. Such amazing work going on, and I'm really happy you were able to share today. Again, check out landsandresources.ca to get more information about the upcoming Anishinaabe Nation Forum. And with that, we will close the morning. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you back again at 1 p.m. for our keynote plenaries for the day.
Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mackenzie.
everyone.
Bama P.
Bye.
Mama P, miigwech.